Welcome to Deep Dive. Today we're going on a visual journey, exploring the fascinating world of animal body plans. You've shared some really cool slides with us, almost like blueprints of how life is built.
It's like cracking open nature's design manual.
Right.
We get to see the strategies that build creatures as different as, say, an elephant and a jellyfish.
Exactly. And we're going to start with something you can picture right away. Symmetry. Like how some things look the same on both sides. We've got this awesome elephant diagram that shows it perfectly.
That elephant image is a great example of bilateral symmetry, which you also see in humans. It's all about having a single plane that divides the body into two mirror images. It's super important for understanding how animals move and interact with their world.
Makes sense. So bilateral symmetry is one type. What are the other ways nature designs things?
Well, think about a starfish. It has radial symmetry, meaning you can slice it multiple ways around a central point, and each part will be a mirror image. It's a different kind of balance that works great for animals that are more stationary, like those stuck to a rock.
Oh, I see. So it's not just about looks. The type of symmetry really tells you something about how the animal lives. Are there any other types?
There's also spherical symmetry, which is super rare. Imagine a perfectly round ball where every part radiates from the center. And then, of course, some organisms just don't have any symmetry at all, like some sponges.
Huh. That's a lot to take in. But you know what's really cool? We can actually see these different symmetries reflected in the way animals have evolved.
Absolutely. For example, this image you provided of a bird and an insect. Both have bilateral symmetry, but their bodies and adaptations are wildly different.
Looking at them side by side really drives home the point about diversity. Okay, so symmetry gives us this basic framework, but there's so much more to an animal's blueprint.
Right. Let's zoom in on a specific group, the chordates. You're probably most familiar with this group because it includes all vertebrates, including us. What sets them apart is that they share 5 key characteristics during their development.
5. Wow. Okay, break it down for us. What's the first thing that makes a chordate a chordate?
Well, the first is the notochord, which is like a flexible rod that supports the body. You can actually see it in this image of a developing fish embryo.
Oh, wow, I see it. It's almost like a backbone, but not quite as rigid.
Exactly. In many chordates, the notochord is eventually replaced by a bony vertebral column, but in some like the lancelet, it sticks around for their whole life. Another defining feature is the dorsal hollow nerve cord, which sits above the notochord and develops into the central nervous system, the brain and spinal cord.
That makes sense. It's like the command center running along their back. So, 2 down, 3 to go. What else do we have?
All right, next up are pharyngeal slits. Now, these are fascinating because their function can change over an animal's life.
Ooh, how so?
Well, in early chordates, they're used for filter feeding, like straining tiny food particles from the water. But in fish, they develop into gills for respiration.
That's mind-blowing. I never realized that those slits in fish gills were connected to something so fundamental in chordate evolution.
It really highlights the ingenious way that evolution repurposes existing structures for new functions.
I'm looking at these images of the grouper and the striped yellowfish, and it's amazing to see how those slits are present in both, even though they look so different.
Exactly. Now, the fourth characteristic is a post-anal tail. It might seem simple, but plays a huge role in locomotion balance and even communication in some animals.
I'm picturing a dog wagging its tail.
Oh, yeah.
That's 4 features. What's the final characteristic that defines chordates?
The fifth one is the endostyle. It's a groove on the ventral side of the pharynx, and it secretes mucus in early chordates. What's fascinating is that in vertebrates, this endostyle develops into the thyroid gland.
Whoa. So the same structure that helps them filter food early on transforms into a gland that regulates metabolism. Evolution is so wild.
It is. And, speaking of internal structures, another key aspect of body plans is the coelom. It's a fluid-filled body cavity, kind of like a built-in shock absorber and space maker for organs.
Okay, let's unpack this. Why is the coelom so important?
While animals with a true coelom, called coelmates, have more complex organ systems and can grow larger compared to animals without one. Take a look at this image comparing an earthworm, which is a coelmate, to a simpler organism.
Wow, the difference is really striking. You can see how much more space the earthworm has for its organs.
Exactly. And that space allows for specialization and increased efficiency, which are huge advantages in terms of survival and evolution.
So no coelom. Less room to grow and evolve makes sense.
Now, it's not always a simple yes or no when it comes to coeloms. We also have what are called pseudocoelomates. Their body cavity isn't completely aligned with the specific tissue type that defines a true coelom. It's like a partially finished room. You have some space, but not as much organization.
Ah, so it's like a stepping stone between having no column and having a full-fledged one.
Exactly. And this cross-section of a roundworm perfectly illustrates that. You can see the pseudocarmen and how it provides some space,
Yeah.
but not the same level of organization as a true column.
This is making me realize that even seemingly small differences in body structure can have huge impacts on how an animal functions and thrives.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, one of the most fascinating innovations in animal body plans is segmentation. Think back to that earthworm image.
Yeah.
Its body is made up of repeating units, each with its own set of organs.
Right. I remember learning about that in school. It's like having multiple backup systems.
Exactly. And it allows for incredible flexibility and efficiency of movement.
It's like those bendy straws. You can move them in so many ways because they're segmented.
That's a great analogy. And what's even cooler? Segmentation isn't just limited to earthworms. We see it in insects, crustaceans, and even vertebrates like
Look,
ourselves.
we're segmented. I don't see repeating segments in my body.
Well, our segmentation is a bit more subtle, but it's there. Think about our rib cage or the vertebrae in our spine. Those are remnants of our segmented ancestry.
That is so cool. I never thought about it that way. Okay, so we've got symmetry, coeloms, and segmentation. Are those like the main building blocks of animal body plans?
They're definitely some of the key features. And to understand how different groups of animals are related, we need to dive into another important distinction: Deuterostomes versus Protostomes. It might sound a bit technical, but it's actually pretty straightforward.
All right, lay it on me. I'm ready for a challenge.
Well, it all comes down to how the first opening in a developing embryo, called the blastopore, develops. In protostomes, that opening becomes the mouth. But in deuterostomes, it becomes the anus.
Wait, so one group develops mouth first and the other anus first? That's bizarre, but you said it has big implications, right?
It does. It has a cascading effect on the entire development of the digestive system and the overall body plan.
I'm looking at these images of the starfish, a deuterostome, and the annelid cross-section, a protostome. They both have complex bodies, but it's wild to think that their development starts so differently.
It really shows how evolution can take different paths to achieve complexity and diversity.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Symmetry, chordates, columns, segmentation, and even blastopores. I feel like I'm just starting to grasp the complexity of animal body plans.
You're definitely on the right track. And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore how these blueprints translate into the incredible diversity of appendages we see in the animal kingdom.
Appendages. You mean like legs and wings and tentacles? I can't wait.
It's going to be fascinating.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been talking about all these fundamental body plan features, and I'm still reeling from that mouth first versus anus first development thing.
It's definitely one of those evolutionary quirks that makes you appreciate the strange paths life can take. But as fascinating as these internal structures are, we can't forget about what we see on the outside.
You're talking about appendages, right? That's everything from a cheetah's legs to a butterfly's wings. It's like nature's toolkit for getting things done.
Exactly. Appendages are those extensions from the body that have evolved for all sorts of amazing functions: locomotion, feeding, sensing, even defense.
Okay, so I'm picturing those powerful legs of a cheetah built for speed. How does that tie back to the body plan stuff we were talking about?
Well, the placement and structure of appendages are directly related to an animal's symmetry and overall body plan. For example, bilaterally symmetrical animals tend to have paired appendages, like our arms and legs.
As you know, humans are bilaterally symmetrical, so that makes sense. But what about animals with radial symmetry, like starfish? What do their appendages look like?
Starfish actually have tube feet, which are these tiny extendable structures that they use for movement and grabbing onto things. They're arranged in rows along their arms, which, as you know, radiate out from a central point.
So even their appendages reflect that radial symmetry. That's so cool.
It is. And the diversity of appendages is just mind-boggling. Think about the delicate wings of a dragonfly, perfectly designed for aerial acrobatics, or the prehensile tail of a monkey, which acts like an extra limb for navigating the trees.
It's like each appendage is a specialized tool honed by millions of years of evolution. And what's really fascinating is that the same basic body plan can give rise to incredibly diverse appendages.
You're absolutely right. A great example of that is the vertebrate limb. The underlying structure is the same whether you're looking at a human arm, a bat's wing, or a whale's flipper.
Wait, seriously? A whale's flipper and my arm have the same basic structure? That's wild.
It is, over millions of years. That basic limb structure has been modified and adapted for all sorts of functions: swimming, flying, grasping, digging. It's a testament to the power of evolution, to tinker with existing structures and create incredible diversity.
So evolution isn't about starting from scratch every time. It's about taking what's already there and making modifications to suit different needs.
Exactly. It's like a master sculptor, working with the same clay but creating an endless variety of forms.
Okay, so we've talked about how appendages fit into the body plan puzzle, but earlier we were also discussing body cavities. We covered columns and pseudocolumns, but what about animals that don't have a body cavity at all?
Ah, yes, the Coeloms.
Yeah.
They represent a fascinating branch in the tree of life. These animals lack that fluid-filled cavity that we talked about, which means they tend to be simpler in structure and smaller in size.
So, no fancy internal space for organs, but you're saying they're still successful.
Absolutely. Think about flatworms. They're telomates, and they're incredibly diverse, with over 20,000 species found all over the planet.
I guess you don't need a column to thrive if you've got other strategies working for you.
Exactly. Their flat shape,
Mm-hmm.
which is related to their lack of a column, actually allows them to squeeze into tight spaces and move through their environment in ways that Coeloms can't.
So even what might seem like a primitive feature can be an advantage depending on the animal's lifestyle.
It really challenges our assumptions about what it means to be complex or advanced in the animal kingdom. There's no one-size-fits-all definition of success in the evolutionary game.
This is making me realize that the whole survival of the fittest idea isn't just about being the biggest or the strongest. It's about being well-suited to your particular environment.
That's a great insight. Evolution isn't about progress towards some ultimate goal. It's about adapting to the challenges of the environment and finding solutions that work.
Okay, so body plans aren't just blueprints for success. They also come with certain limitations, right? Like a cheetah might be super fast, but it can't climb trees like a monkey.
That's a great point. Every body plan has its trade-offs. For example, animals with exoskeletons, like insects and crustaceans,
Yeah.
have to molt their hard outer covering in order to grow.
Oh, right. I remember seeing a video of a cicada molting. It looked so vulnerable while its new exoskeleton was hardening.
Exactly. It's a risky process, and it limits how large those animals can grow. There are also physical constraints related to body size and shape. Imagine trying to support a giant insect with those spindly legs.
Yeah, that wouldn't work too well. So body plans are like a balancing act between maximizing advantages and minimizing limitations.
That's a perfect way to put it. And this balance plays out in every aspect of an animal's life, from how it finds food to how it reproduces.
It's fascinating to consider how these seemingly subtle anatomical differences can have such profound consequences for an animal's survival and success.
And it brings us back to the idea that understanding animal body plans is about more than just memorizing facts. It's about appreciating the interconnectedness of life and the intricate ways in which evolution has shaped the diversity of the natural world.
So it's not just about what animals look like, but how those features help them thrive in their specific environments.
Exactly. And as we continue our deep dive, let's keep those connections in mind. For in the grand scheme of things, every animal, from the simplest sponge to the most complex primate, shares a common ancestry and a remarkable story of survival.
You know, as we're talking about all these incredible adaptations, I can't help but wonder how animals are coping with all the environmental changes happening in the world today.
That's a crucial question. And it highlights another important aspect of animal body plans, their limitations. As environments change, some animals might find their once advantageous features become liabilities.
So a body plan that was perfectly suited for one environment might not be so great in a changing world. It makes you wonder if there are any examples of animals that have already undergone significant changes to their body plans in response to environmental pressures.
There are actually quite a few fascinating examples. Take the evolution of whales, for instance. Their ancestors were land-dwelling mammals. But over millions of years, they transitioned to a fully aquatic lifestyle.
Whales used to walk on land. That's mind-blowing. What kind of changes did they go through?
Well, their limbs transformed into flippers, their tails developed flukes for propulsion, their bodies became streamlined for swimming, and they even lost their hind limbs entirely.
Wow. It's like a complete remodeling of their body plan.
It is, and it highlights the incredible plasticity of life, the ability to evolve and change over time. But adaptation isn't always about such dramatic transformations. Sometimes, it's about subtle shifts in existing features.
Can you give us an example of that?
Certainly. Think about the beaks of Darwin's finches. Those birds provide a classic example of how small variations in beak shape can lead to specialization for different food sources. Finches with thick, powerful beaks are adapted for cracking seeds, while those with slender, pointed beaks are better suited for probing for insects.
So even slight modifications to a body plan can have a big impact on an animal's ecological role.
Absolutely. And this brings us back to the importance of understanding the interconnectedness of life and the intricate web of relationships that exists within ecosystems. Changes in one species can ripple through an entire community, influencing the evolution of other species and shaping the overall biodiversity of an environment.
It's like a giant puzzle where every piece is connected.
Mm.
And understanding animal body plans gives us a glimpse into how those pieces fit together.
Precisely. And as we conclude our deep dive into animal body plans, I'd like to leave you with one final thought to ponder. Consider the impact of environmental change on animal body plans. As climate change and habitat loss continue to alter the world around us, how will animals adapt? Will their body plans be flexible enough to meet the challenges of a rapidly changing world?
That's a big question.
These are questions that scientists are actively grappling with, and the answers will have profound implications for the future of life on Earth.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been exploring this amazing world of animal body plans, and I'm ready to kind of keep unpacking these ideas. Before we paused, we were talking about how environmental changes can challenge those very blueprints of life.
It's like nature's constantly testing its own designs.
Right.
What worked perfectly for millions of years might suddenly become a liability as the world around them shifts.
Yeah, we were just talking about those incredible transformations that whales went through to become fully aquatic. But you were saying that not all adaptation is quite that dramatic. Sometimes it's about smaller tweaks to existing features.
Exactly. Like, think about those Darwin's finches we mentioned. Their beaks are like a masterclass in subtle adaptations. Those small variations in beak size and shape allow them to specialize in different food sources.
So a finch with a thick, powerful beak is going to be like a seed-crushing machine, while one with a slender, pointy beak is all about those hard-to-reach insects.
Yeah. It's fascinating how these tiny differences can have such a big impact on their survival.
It highlights how evolution worked on multiple levels, right? From large-scale transformations to those really intricate refinements. It's not just about individual species adapting, it's about entire ecosystems evolving together.
Okay, so let's imagine a forest.
Hmm.
If the climate changes and certain trees start to disappear, the animals that rely on those trees for food or shelter are going to face some serious challenges.
Precisely. And that's where the flexibility of their body plan comes into play. Some species might be able to adapt by shifting their diets or, finding new habitats.
But what about those that can't adapt quickly enough? Sadly, those species might face extinction. And that's why understanding these animal body plans is so important. It helps us predict how different species might respond to environmental change and identify the ones that are most vulnerable.
So it's not just about appreciating the diversity of life, it's about protecting it. That's a powerful message.
It is. And as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into these animal body plans, I want to leave you with this thought. We've been talking about how evolution has shaped life on Earth for millions of years. But now humans are becoming a major force in shaping the future of evolution.
Don't even hear.
Well, think about all the ways that we're impacting the planet. Climate change, habitat loss, pollution. These changes are happening at an unprecedented rate.
Yeah.
And they're putting immense pressure on animals to adapt.
So we're kind of like speeding up the evolutionary clock.
In a way, yes.
Yeah.
And that raises some ethical questions.
Yeah.
We have a responsibility to be mindful of the impact we're having on the natural world and to make choices that support biodiversity.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive. We've gone from marveling at these intricate designs of animal bodies to grappling with some really profound questions about the future of life on Earth.
It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope our listeners have come away with a deeper appreciation for the incredible diversity and resilience of life on our planet.
I know I have. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive.